Episode 42, part 1 is underway with 84 feet with Cady and Cap. As always, I'm Brian Cady. Good to have you aboard as we keep on trucking along. We're now, let's see, 21 plus 4. We're 25 days away from sectional seedings coming out. Yes, I am starting the countdown. I'm officially inside a month, so let's do it. As we are recording this on Monday, January 27th in the morning, around 10 a.m. Obviously, given the date and time I just said, this is the first time I'm recording since the news that came out this previous Friday on the 24th about my good friend Brian Capitula being relieved of his duties from Albany Academy girls varsity head coach. I'm not making any public comment about the situation or anything that I know regarding the situation, because honestly, I don't know everything. And so it's not my place to try and tell a story that I don't have all the facts about. And honestly, I believe it's nobody's story to tell if you're not from the inner workings of the situation, whether it's Cap, whether it's whatever administration made this decision to relieve him of his duties or whatever it may be. So I'm not going to speculate about what happened or anything like that. Again, that's between Cap, that's between the Albany Academy administration, and I'm leaving it at that. Cap had originally planned on taking a few weeks off from the podcast anyways, when he was originally just suspended earlier in the week last week. So him not being here the next few episodes at the least was already pre-planned. So that's neither here nor there at this point. And so obviously I wish Cap the best with whatever is happening going forward. I know he made a trip. He had a good weekend as far as his travels were concerned. He went out and visited his old mentor, Brian Fruccio, over at Canterbury back on Friday night. And then him and I we caught up Saturday night because after I announced my doubleheader at RPI, we both caught up at Tamarac's Big Red Day because Caleb Bedoin, who played for Elevate, it was her senior night. So we were able to get there. And naturally, God forbid, and Jeff, you'll appreciate this as I bring in Jeff Moliner now from Empire State Takeover. God forbid I try going anywhere as a damn spectator. Because originally I was trying to get myself to figure out my schedule so somebody covered RPI for me. And then I could be at Big Red Day to do both JV games and both varsity games because girls and boys played literally the entire day. They had modified games. Then they had both the JV teams play before both of the varsity teams played. And just, I can't imagine. I mean, the Tamarack Booster Club and those fans, I mean, props to you for going through a hellaciously long day of basketball. But anyways, but I couldn't get my schedule to work out, so I still announced at RPI, but I told Ron Bedoin and I told Eric Medved, look, I can't be there on time to give you the proper effort to announce like I would like to, but I'm at least going to show up and show my face and show support because me and Eric go back over a decade, and I've gotten to know Ron and Kayla well over the last 12 months. Sure enough, my dumbass decides to take pop a squat near the scores table. I got to watch the first half of the girls varsity game, and then Eric Medved, as soon as I locked eyes with him, I was like, oh God, I know what this is going to be. Probably assume what I did for the last half of the girls game and then the whole varsity game for the boys. Yeah. I don't know. I can't go anywhere.
And they got you. They milk you dry.
Yeah. I'm sure that
Big Red Day.
You go somewhere, everybody's asking you questions about something or another, and you're just like, oh, I just want to enjoy myself. I just want to relax.
I'm always having fun. But yeah, Big Red Day is a pretty cool tradition. That I haven't been to it in a few years, but that I don't know. That's a nice, entertaining kind of like something to look forward to when you're in a school district. Just a full day of home games, senior recognitions. It makes it. I say this word in a good way, but kind of makes a little bit more of a spectacle of it. Something, something to remember.
Yeah, and Tamarack got wins on both sides. The boys handled their business against Lansingburg, even though Lansingburg's size on the boys' side really caused Jacob Price to struggle. But Cam Edmonds had a huge first half, and then Tamarack just kind of stayed steady in the second half to win. On the girls' side, though, and this is how I'm going to just jump in because it's a natural transition. I knew who the focus should have been going in, and just between not being able to buy a bucket and really solid defense by Tamarack, particularly by Caleb Bedoin when she was on her, they held Whitney Cameron completely scoreless for Corinth in their victory over Corinth on Saturday night, which, again, I knew coming out of just watching Corinth at ACC, that was the girl they needed to focus on as far as, at least one of two to game plan around for Corinth. But the fact they were able to hold Whitney Cameron scoreless, I was pretty impressed by that defensive effort from Tamarack to be able to get the job done, not just getting a win, period, but being able to hold Whitney scoreless was really impressive to me.
Yeah, Whitney means so much to that team, not just from the scoring perspective, like not just from her scoring, even though she's a primary scorer for them, but the usage, the amount of times the ball's in her hands, the percentage of the time, the amount of reps that she gets, how they lean on her to create for others. So if you're able to limit her and not, scoreless is kind of an anomaly. Like that's somebody that you're very rarely going to hold down to zero. But, if you're able to keep her in, at nothing or in single digits and limit her offensive impact on the game, you're going to keep that team in the 30s. So, yeah, that's no small task to do that.
Yeah. And, we'll just stick with Class C for this, because the one other game, really the game of the week in Class C, and really, I'd say one of the 3 or 4 big games of the week from last week in general was 2 top 10 state ranked teams meeting up in Section 2, Greenwich and Stillwater at Stillwater. Now, Stillwater, like we had mentioned, they have built up a lot of momentum. They are coming off 2 wins against Mechanicville. Although, as we're kind of looking now, maybe it's funny because, like, you get to a point where, because we're so deep in it, we kind of start looking at things kind of like how I would assume the committee looks at it for like the NCAA tournament. You look at what are good resume wins and bad resume wins, or wins that maybe were good resume wins at first and now you're not so sure. And I feel like the 2 Mechanicville wins, I'm going to hold off judgment on to see how they finish the last few weeks of the season, but I'm kind of in limbo as to how those will measure out in the end.
Stillwater, Greenwich. You mentioned the Mechanicville games and
Right.
kind of being in limbos to,
Okay.
that kind of resume.
All right.
I can jump in right with the Stillwater Greenwich game. The first thing, and this is just kind of a jokey numbers thing, but how? Yeah, are you familiar on Twitter or X or whatever we're going to call it now with the scoreagami?
Yes.
Football?
Yes. That's a
Yeah.
very big thing with NFL scores, particularly.
Mhm. Yes. This isn't quite scoreagami, but how often will there be any matchup, let alone one that's, of this sort of magnitude, when they play each other twice and they play to the exact same score both times? Greenwich Stillwater in Greenwich game that I was at, about a month and a half ago. Greenwich won 54-34. They move it down to Stillwater last week. Different court, different feel, different vibe, same score, 54-34.
That is wild. I didn't even. Wow. I legit did not know that.
Yeah, that was how
It was,
uncommon is that? It's just a numbers anomaly, but
and it was a tale of two halves because Stillwater really held their own and even had the lead, if I remember correctly, at the half on Thursday. But
at the end of the first quarter, they did.
okay.
Yeah, it was 14-12 after one. I was getting updates while I was up in Queensbury with a game that we'll talk about a little bit later on. But yeah, this has been, I think it showed even in that game early in the season. But throwing out the December stuff, this game on Thursday, and then the one that we were both at ACC the previous Sunday when they played Peru, this has been kind of a defense travels stretch for Greenwich, where we know they will be able to score the ball, and they should be able to score the ball relatively consistently. They put 5 kids on the court with 0 liabilities. They have skill, they have athleticism, they've got a high level point guard that can run the show and create offense. So we know that this is a team that when push comes to shove, they're going to be able to score. The defense has traveled not just in the little box of a gym that Greenwich is, but it traveled to the 94-foot court at ACC when they held Peru, who's pretty good, to 1 field goal in the first half. It traveled to Stillwater, another bigger court, that after 14-12 Stillwater at the end of the first, they hold them to 20 the rest of the way. So they can win if it's a team that wants to play, that wants to get up and down the court and make it more of a track meet. They can play that style, but they're showing they can also grind you out defensively in the half court too. Hold you into the hold good teams even as low as the 20s and 30s and win that sort of style too. So yeah, this is it's a state competitive team.
I'm going to pose this question because I feel like it's a question that we're at about the right time where I feel like we can start making these comparisons a little bit. So if you go back 2 years ago, Class C was so ginormous they split into C's and double C's. Or excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 2 years ago.
2 years ago, yes.
And ended up being just a mere formality to get to a Dwaynesburg Greenwich ultimate Class C matchup, with one winning the C's, one winning the double C's. Greenwich wins that, and eventually goes on to states. And I'm trying to remember, did they lose in the semis or the final?
Semis. They lost in the semis to Millbrook.
Okay, so here's the question I'm getting at, because that team was able to do that, and you'll have better recollection than me as to how and why. But they were able to do that without Adriana Rojas, who was in her junior year at that time. Last year, Nana's senior year, they couldn't hit water if they fell out of a boat with the way they shot the ball against Dwaynesburg in the sectional finals, and end up losing by, I think it was like a 20-point-ish game in the end to Dwaynesburg in that sectional final. This year, it's this year, as far as the way this team is going out and getting things done, feels like what it could have done 2 years ago if Rojas was healthy at the time, and expected to see from them last year when she was healthy, but it didn't happen because of what happened in that sectional final. I mean, am I kind of on the right track here, or am I just underestimating how much this team has changed in the last 12 months?
Oh, I'll go both ways with it. Last year, I think with the biggest thing, not the Greenwich folks, I think understood this, but maybe everybody else in Section 2 or their competitors, people that they would bump into, I don't think they, I don't think a lot of people understood how valuable Nora Nietzsche was to that team. Who's now, she was sophomore playing at St. Lawrence University. She was a senior when Nana was a junior.
Right.
And she was a coverall for that sort of group, and that's the sort of kid. When Nana Rojas goes down with the knee injury right before, she went back to back years with knee injury. Her sophomore year at Hudson Valley when they were playing Dwaynesburg, the first time that they of their 3-year invitational at Hudson Valley, and her junior year was right before that. It was in that split class semifinal sort of time frame.
Right.
She played pretty much all season, got hurt then. Uh, they're already kind of on a roll at that point, so it's next player up. But Nora was able to do so much for that group that she was she was very valuable to them before, and then she becomes even more valuable because, all right, Nana's down. What do we need? What do we need more of? And she could just kind of shoulder that load. So that was a big thing with to me, that was a big thing a couple of years ago. Last year was a different team without Nora. So I think that was kind of the overarching thing over the previous couple of years, that how much Nora meant to that group when she was there, how much they missed her after she graduated, maybe more than they realized that they would miss her. But this Greenwich team, with all due respect to those, to the success that they've had in the last few, this is the best Greenwich team to me. You've got some of the same key players like Brooke Kuzmic and Grace Audiello have been a part of this the whole time.
Mm.
Olivia Davis, more so over the last couple of years, but now throwing in Bailey and Jordan with the older, more seasoned, more refined, more complete versions of the players that have been around for a while.
Mm.
This is, to me, this is a different Witch team.
If you don't mind, I'm going to do a cross comparison with a different Section 2 team that's completely, like, when I say different, I mean like real different. But just again, for kind of argument's sake, which, how should I put this? Okay, which is there any surprise at all to how quick both Greenwich and Shaker have made adjustments to transfer additions?
Not to me.
Just because to see what both these, like, Greenwich is kind of assumed just because they still had Grace, they still had Brooke, they still had Liv Davis. Riley Brophy is a great contributor as well. So I feel like their success was just kind of assumed. I don't know if anybody was calling for them to be undefeated all this far into the season, but at least the expectation was kind of there just based off reputation of everybody involved, all parts involved. Shaker, I think, is just a little different in that, like, if you knew Malia, you knew what to expect. But for those maybe from the Suburban Council and the AA, AAA side of things, I feel like she was a bit of an unknown quantity, and combined with the style Shaker had grown into playing in the recent last few years, that was more um, up in the air, to say the least, in a way. But because of the quality of talent, you just knew it had to work out at some point.
Yeah, I'm going to bring up the three letters of the spring and summer for both of these in different fashions. Greenwich, I had absolutely, and people, when the word was out that the Wolves were transferring over to Greenwich, I heard, from people that don't really pay attention to basketball all year. I heard the same sort of, well, yeah, there's talent. Okay, you have talent, but how do those pieces fit? Is there enough basketballs on the court for all of them? How do they work with the others? Like, they all play AAU together. They're all on the same team. Brooke, Bailey, Jordan, Liv Davis, and Grace, up until she didn't play through the entirety of last AAU season, but Riley Brophy as well was in that mix. They're all Foothills Flash kids, along with Whitney Cameron, who we just brought up. Like, they're all part of the same team. They've played AAU together for 2-3 years at this point. It wasn't like you were taking two puzzle pieces that they didn't have familiarity with and just put them into the mix. They played together for years. They've played more games together than they've played in let's say 2 years of AAU. They've played like 4 high school seasons worth of games. So that wasn't a concern to me. There's a little bit of a scholastic setting is a little bit different. There, kids can feel in certain ways a little more pressure, some more eyes, whatever. There's maybe some different kinds of expectations. So there's a little bit of smoothing over as roles change, because scholastic basketball is a little bit more of like like college basketball. It's a game of roles, compared to AAU is not so much in the way of like role playing. So there was that to smooth over, but it wasn't like you were putting they were new to a Greenwich uniform. They weren't new to playing with the people that they were about to play with. Shaker, yes, a little bit different in the sense of it's not like all those kids play AAU together. So it was putting a new piece in. If you did pay attention, if you weren't, if you don't watch AAU, or if you don't pay attention to AAU circuit around here, yes, that was the reaction with Malia, because being a Hudson kid, which not as much, or not as strongly paid attention to, especially by your suburban folks, and also being a forward at that level with guards that can't really get you the ball doesn't really show you in the most positive light. So if you didn't pay attention to AAU basketball and spring summer the last couple of years around here, then that's more of an unknown commodity. If you did, and you saw her play with Havoc, and she's played with Havoc, she played with New Heights down in New York City at one point. So she's been around, she's been here and then down and back up. So if you've seen her there, you knew exactly what you were going to get. New piece, yes. But it's also like taking the garage that has the Beamers, Benz, and Bentleys and putting a Hummer in it. Like, we're okay. I'm cool. I got a new one. Yeah, look at this nice shiny thing. It's not like you're throwing my Toyota Corolla in there. You take the Hummer, put it in. You just got to figure out how to make it work around all the other cars. And I think so. That team, the Shaker team, what's key to Malia fitting with that group and how they've been able to have success with that. Jayla Jeter, Jayla at the point where you have some kids that thrive in certain styles of play, others that thrive in some other in different ways. Jayla's kind of a chameleon point guard in the sense that she can play in the half court, she can utilize ball screens, play pick and roll game. She's one of the rare, or becoming exceedingly rare guards that can create passing lanes and passing angles to get the ball in the post. Post play is not dead in women's basketball. Guards that can make effective post entry passes, yeah, that's dying. So Jayla's ability to create passing angles, get the ball in the blocks, that helps. To be able to fit passes, whether it's throw over the top or pocket passes and ball screens. Her ability to also to lead transition, get up, play an up-tempo style, and also be successful in the half court. I think that's big for Malia's success. And I think Peyton Hoblock's natural skill set is one of a face-up player. So when you have a forward where Peyton has heard, I'll say this because I know Peyton has heard this over and over again. People telling her, get in the blocks, you're bigger than everybody else. You can dominate around the rim. She's a face-up player. She's a stretch player. It's what her natural skill set is. It's where her comfort zone really is. So having Malia as a more back to the basket, rugged forward, they can complement each other. Their skill sets kind of fit each other naturally, where you see fewer and fewer, quote, too big lineups, but those two complement each other pretty well. So that one maybe a little bit more, not necessarily smoothing over, but a little bit more time and reps needed to get everyone acclimated with each other and the new digs. But especially with Jayla's chameleon-ish ability and offensively as a point guard, Peyton being more of a face-up sort of forward. It took a little time, but everything, the pieces fit. The pieces fit to me.
All right. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's almost kind of like they addressed the how should I put this? The adjustments were kind of reversed for the two. Now that I really think about it, because Greenwich had they had the guard presence, and they had Liv Davis who can hang and bang down low. So Bailey and Jordan, while Jordan has a back down game a bit too, Bailey's a big stretch player. And Jordan's a stretch player to a degree too, whereas Shaker already had the stretch play with Hoblock, the two Lonnie sisters, and they brought in the down low bruiser. It was kind of like the weird kind of, did that make sense? Anyways, I'm going way beyond my realm here. Let's go to Class D now. We kind of started things a little bit in reverse with C, but here's D now. Really the only things of note, honestly, Hartford, they took care of business at home against Fort Anne Tuesday. Then they turn around and lose by 10 to Corinth at Corinth, which by no means is a bad loss. Even though Corinth is a league loss, Corinth is a Class B. So by no means is losing by 10 at Corinth a bad loss. And now, the game that I know last week or 2 weeks ago when speaking to them, last week. It was last week. I forgot. I recorded 2 interviews in 1 week. After talking to Jason Johnson, Mackenzie Johnson, this is a game they've had circled on their calendar since they made their schedule. They're visiting Northfield tonight in one of the games of the night. And what might go down, potentially, depending on how well this Hartford team travels. We got to see how, Kaylin Severance and Mackenzie Johnson come out and play in this environment. They get to play at Northville. 5 o'clock start. Early start time for a varsity game. But they get to go to Northville, take on the defending Class C sectional champs, New York State finalists last year, who lost to Hammond Central, who I don't know any Class D team that was beating Hammond Central last year out of the ones I had seen. And that was Hammond Central going back to back in state championships. So, but anyways, and Northville brought back essentially everybody. They still have Haley Monroe, Izzy Cologne, who's only a sophomore, by the way. And Northville is packed with 7 seniors out of a 9-player roster. So it's really going to be a case of, how well does this Hartford team travel? Because it's obviously not a short trek to Northville for them. But this is also going to be, if you look at Hartford's schedule, even though they played some, Section 7 teams in their schedule, they've played Spa Catholic. Let's see who else here. They had a good win at Lake George about 2 weeks ago. This really is like their game of the year. So it's a question of getting up for this, not just coming off, a schedule that's maybe not quite up at Northville's level with the opponents they've played so far, but also coming off a road loss already in conference.
Yeah, what I'll appreciate about Jason Johnson and Hartford is over the last several years, now keep in mind Hartford's had some success. They've been around the top of the Adirondack League for a while, at least, whether they've won or lose in the championship game or just, generally like a top 3 Adirondack League team in recent years. They were a state Final
Four team. They were a state Final Four team 3 years ago when Mackenzie was an 8th grader.
Yep, that's I was about to say, like, they made it to Hudson Valley in mid-March. In that it was Mackenzie's 8th grade year. With Carly Nims and Gabby McFerrin, that senior campaign. So they've had success. With all that said, when I've watched them over the last several years, I've probably watched them lose more games than win. And that's not because I'm bad luck. It's because I think Jason Johnson does a pretty good job of being a little bit adventurous with his scheduling. Who are the top 3 teams that we've been talking about all year, pretty much exclusively in Class D?
Northville, Hartford, Spa Catholic.
None of them are in the same league, but Hartford plays both of them. Who was the last before Northville, and not including Hartford, who was the other recent good D?
Well,
Dietz and Wiley.
Well, I was going to say Gibbons. I just didn't know if that was really the direction you were going to. That's all.
When Gibbons was good, Hartford and Gibbons scheduled each other. I've watched Hartford lose in Schenectady at Gibbons. So I think I'll give him credit in the sense I think he does he doesn't duck stuff. You want to see you have to beat these guys in the long haul. All right, let's see where we're at compared to them now. So, I always appreciate that. Never too hepped up on teams that are decent that just schedule cream puff non-league games. They're getting their share of wins in the Adirondack League. Take these non-leaguers and see what we can get out of them. See where Catholic at, see where Northville is at, or see where we're at compared to Northville. And let's play them and like going to Northville, they're playing them on the road too. They took Spa Catholic at home, but playing Northville on the road.
And I feel like that's kind of what Jason Johnson was alluding to when we were talking. And if you missed that interview with me, Jason, and Mackenzie, by all means, go back in the archives on Spotify or YouTube and check it out. It's episode 40, part 2 is how it's labeled. Um,
You should have the ticker right now.
right. I'm trying to remember what the title of it was. Hang on, I have it right in front of me. Tanner just fly together. That's right. I did the Mighty Ducks theme for the team. I forgot about that. But that's one thing Jason definitely alluded to in that interview is that like that's exactly his approach. Like, because I think if I remember the story correctly, and again go back to the interview to check, I believe his story was he crossed paths with Jim Zulo. It was either during the state final last year, because I do remember seeing Jason at I believe not the state final, the sectional final, when I believe Northville beat Gibbons in that sectional final. I believe I remember seeing Jason there that night. It was either that or while they were in the Final Four at States at Hudson Valley. I don't remember. Like cross paths with Jim and basically said, "Why not? Like, let's do this." And Jim was basically like, "Okay, yeah, that's really the long and short of it." Because like you said, and having gotten to know Jason the last few years, it makes complete sense. He doesn't give a damn. Like, he doesn't give a damn if you're going to bring out all 6-footers or if you're bringing out, all 5'2" guards. He'll take your face on and not give a damn. He's a bulldog. Like, and that's how he coaches his players to be. He like, and the prime example I mentioned in that interview to him was Lana Dunda. Like, if there's anybody I feel like was an extension of the coach, it was Dunda for Jason Johnson not too long ago. But that's just how he is, man. He coaches those players to be dogs out there and just grind and be gritty and not be afraid of contact. And that's God, I love when players weren't afraid of contact, man. So the chance I get to see a program where players aren't afraid of contact, whether it be drawing it on the offensive end or taking the charge on the defensive end, it's warms the cockles of my heart. So yeah, man. I mean, that's just the long and short of it. And good on Jason for going out and getting that game and making it happen. And that's really the game of the week in Class D. It looks like, because all the other games of the week I have listed are Class C and up. So,
yeah, no, that Hartford team, you put it the right way. They are kind of an extension of him. Sorry, my watch spoke to me, so I just got a little sidetracked.
You're good.
But no, they are kind of an extension of him. Like, they've had different personnel over the last handful of years. A few years ago when they made that state run, they worked a lot through Carly Nims, who's a big 6-footer. Their tallest kid now is about 5'6". So the roster makeup is very different. That's just public high school athletics, especially when you're talking small towns, small schools. But roster makeup might be different. How they score, how they operate on the offensive end might be a little different, but their identity is the same.
All right, man. Let's go on to Class B. And this actually addresses one of the 3 games for Section 2 that you attended this past week. Literally just happened last night because Coxsackie-Athens, they got through Cobleskill back on Tuesday, so it's set up the matchup we were waiting for last night as part of the Coaches versus Cancer event that I believe it's the Patroon Conference they host it every year, correct?
Yes.
At Columbia Green. At Columbia Green Community College. It was a whole weekend event, and they capped it off with a meeting of the 2 top teams in the Patroon Conference this year. At the time, the undefeated Riverhawks of Coxsackie-Athens taking on Catskill. Both were undefeated in Section 2 play. Coxsackie was undefeated overall. Catskill, we mentioned a week or 2 ago, their loss at Wallkill out of Section 9. Again, no shame in losing to Zoe Misic and the Fighting AJ Higbees down in Wallkill.
The
Um,
Fighting Higbees.
the Fighting Higbees. That's how I like to call them. And then last night, man, I mean, you can just kind of take it from here. Basically, it was a case of Coxsackie-Athens was able to create enough transition to start out well in the first quarter, and then from there on out, just that skill grind them away with I think it was a 3-2 zone you talked about last night, and really just able to ride that to victory and stop the undefeated record of Coxsackie-Athens.
Yeah, the Quins get the most out of their kids. I'll tell you that much, and that's been a thing for Catskill over the last few years. But fun, and not necessarily fun fact going into it, but I was thinking this as I was driving down there. You know how certain, even there might be little in the grand scheme of things, but certain days or certain settings or places that you've been kind of stick out in your mind. I can tell you, I can distinctly remember the last time I went to the Patroon Conference Coaches versus Cancer thing at Columbia Green. That's been happening for, I couldn't tell you exactly how many years. I don't know if it's been the whole time I've been doing this. I don't think it has, but it's been a minute now. But the last time I can distinctly remember, it was 5 years ago. And I can also distinctly remember that kind of the headlining game was a natural headlining game because it's the rivalry, but they had Catskill Hudson there. I remember it because I was standing in that gym when I heard that Kobe died.
Oh wow!
So yes, sir, it was 5 years to the day. It's one of I distinctly remember I was with Janae Brantley's father, and I think it was her brother that came over and said something. So I was thinking that as I drove down, like I remember distinctly. I remember the last time I was here because I was in this gym. I was standing in this corner of the gym waiting for it was boys game going on. I'm waiting for the girls game to start because I remember it because somebody came over and said Kobe died.
Damn, that's wild, man. That is really wild.
Yeah. But the more things change, the more they stay the same. 5 years later, Catskill has the headlining game of a Patroon Coaches versus Cancer. So, great crowd, game of the year in the Patroon, and everybody knows it.
And de facto championship game, essentially, right? Because there's no conference title game this year.
Right. There's no conference championship game. That's what it was because they both beat Maple Hill. So unless there was something along the lines that I've missed as far as like one of the Maple Hill wins being a non-league or anything like that, that was undefeated. That was unbeaten in league play and Section 2 play, Catskill, against unbeaten in general, Coxsackie. So, it was game of the year, game of the year in the Patroon. Everybody knew it. I saw a lot of neutral faces that were there. So I saw the Lazinskis from Maple Hill. Saw the Greenville crew, the Fitzmaurice family, Charlotte Dawson. It was the faces of the Patroon were there. And again, great crowd. There was a lot of people that said they would just catch the Bills Chiefs highlights apparently because 6:30 start in Kansas City, 6:30 start at Columbia Green, and it was a pretty packed house. But Catskill was ready for the moment. They came out in this is the natural, or this is the term for them. I don't necessarily mean it, or I don't mean it in a demeaning way, but they kind of came out in the gimmick defenses, the box and ones, the triangle and twos. So, which was predictable, when you're talking about teams with individual star power. But Catskill went triangle and 2 on Bailey Brisky and Reagan Helen. Coxsackie went box and 1 on Ava Edmond in the middle, and pretty much they're daring guards to hit shots. And Alessia Salerno happened. It was kind of the long and short of it. They went box for about 22 minutes. Eventually switched and matched up. By the time they matched up, Alessia already had 22, and she was in a great rhythm. She finished the game with 30, which maybe a career high for her, maybe not. I know she's had her share, a decent amount of games in the 20s, but considering the gravity of that game and the environment and whatever, I'm sure that we're looking at that saying that's the best performance of her high school career. Like that's a highlight of her high school career to this point. 30 points, shot it well, a lot of big plays, a lot of big shots, and a big game basically determined the league. And let's be real, Catskill is at a point where, yes, the last time I watched them was 10 days prior when they barely squeaked by Ravenna. To their credit, this was a very different team than what I saw then. They've lost one game. It's to Wallkill. I don't remember who they have left on their schedule, but it's a lot of winnable stuff.
I have it right in front of me.
Okay.
Catskill's remaining schedule is they host Cairo Durham tomorrow night. Then and they host Hudson on Friday. Then they have, to wrap it up, they have at Greenville, at Germantown, at RCS, and then home against Taconic Hills.
Okay, so they have 6 games left, and we're really, with all due respect, we're really only looking at the Greenville and Ravenna games, right? So they run the table here. They really put themselves in a position to be the 1 seed.
And then
only one loss to Wallkill. What Class B is right now, the level of openness, they put themselves in position to maybe be the 1.
And then on the by the way, I double checked both Maple Hill wins. The one at Maple Hill for Catskill, the one at home for Coxsackie, those were both league wins, so there was nothing out of order there.
Okay, so yeah, so that's your de facto league championship because they're both.
Let me put this out there real quick. Hypothetically, this is again, like, we're completely hypotheticals.
Mhm.
The Greenville game is at Greenville. Let's be hypothetical for half second. Say Catskill gets upset at Greenville. And I'm assuming we would both agree that would be an upset, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Let's say Greenville pulls off the home upset against Catskill. Coxsackie rest of the way is at Waterville, at Maple Hill, and Maple Hill's going to get up because when they met Coxsackie 2 months ago or 2.5 months ago, it was only a 3-point loss at Coxsackie. So,
and it was Maple Hill's season opener.
Right.
You have 2 or 3 games in.
Then Coxsackie will host Chatham, then they'll close the season at Stillwater.
And they have one more after that might not be. So
it's not on the official schedule yet.
Yeah, 18th, right before sectional seeding, Malone from Section 10 is coming down. They're going to play at Coxsackie, and Malone's pretty good.
Okay. Now, assuming Catskill doesn't have any additional games other than the ones we went through already.
Mm-hmm.
If Catskill gets tripped up at Greenville and Coxsackie, let's say they get through all that, but lose at Stillwater. So you're looking at 2 losses. For Catskill, the losses are Coxsackie Excuse me. The two losses are for Catskill. It's Wallkill and Greenville. The two losses for Coxsackie would be Catskill and Stillwater. If
Mhm.
you're in the room Friday the 21st, where you draw the line?
So my understanding is, and you would have to, or we would have to double up with Mark Bubniak or with league reps like Chris Quinn on this.
Mm-hmm.
My understanding is you are going to get seated within the order in which you placed in your league. So so using
Assuming
that
they,
type of
assuming they lose to, so assuming Catskill loses to Greenville,
they would
Stillwater is Stillwater's a league game. Are
no
they
Stillwater's Wazarin.
okay?
So
So they both be one loss in the league,
with Catskill
but
holding the head-to-head.
head to head. So it'd still be Catskill anyways.
Yes. That's why we'd have to clarify that with Mark and with league reps. But I believe that you are getting seated at least the order in which you get seated among teams within your league is how you place within your league.
Okay.
So that so that win, considering what Catskill has left on its schedule and what Coxsackie has left, that win puts Catskill ahead of Coxsackie in 3.5 weeks with sectional seeding, unless some like crazy stuff happens.
Okay. Seeds will be selected based upon league rankings / league records to determine placement of teams with their own league, common opponent, strength of schedule, strength of league, non-league record, and committee discretion. So basically, assuming head-to-head is weighed in when it comes to, how you place teams that are matching records, then yeah, Catskill would stay one. Is
Because
what I
the reason that I remember that is I didn't realize that was a thing in my first few years, but there was a situation. Oh, it was a situation at the WAC Cup that involved Fonda and somebody else. And I want to say, so Fonda was historic when Fonda had their success, they were historically underseeded. And they
Mhm.
made a run as a 13, they made a run as like a 10, or they had they were a 12 seed and they won a couple games. Like the one year that they were a high seed, they were the two, they lost in the quarterfinals to Johnstown. I want to say it was that year that maybe McKeel, who was a B at that point, beat up on Fonda in the WAC Cup. But Fonda had placed above McKeel in the WAC league standings prior to that championship game. And it was also late enough. It was like the day before sectional seeding. So they weren't going to factor games in that day for seeding purposes. So it was like, we win this game by 25, we lose it by 50. We're still going to be a higher seed than McKeel, regardless, because kind of like the end of regular season league rankings for league placement.
Okay. All right. So that's where we stand. Basically, it's barring complete implosion and disaster, we're looking at Catskill 1, and let me look at these Class B seedings to make sure I'm right. Yeah, so basically looking at Coxsackie 1, Catskill 2, and then just the way things are lining up right now, one would assume Tamarack 3, and then I'll throw this in there. No offense to Wasserin, but when you're Voorheesville and you're putting in the work they're doing, despite having to play, because I think their 3 losses are
Academy, Catholic High,
and Holy Names, is it?
no, they lost. They had the perplexing loss to Ichabod.
Oh, right.
This is a big so
Yes.
this is a big week for Voorheesville. We're talking Class B and the thoughts of seeding and whatever.
4
This
games in 6 days, man.
this is a big week for Voorheesville because they have Shalmont and Holy Names on the schedule.
And it's 4 games in 6 days. They're at Chatham tonight in a non-league game. Then they go to Shalmont Wednesday, host Holy Names on Friday, which, by the way, if you use the website I'm using to keep track of all Section 2, which is highschoolsportstats.com, which is basically certain sections in New York State have kind of gotten away from Max Preps and gone to this as their hub. It's listed as TBA. It's a 6:30 tip-off, just so everyone knows. 6:30 Friday night at Voorheesville. And then Saturday, they're going to turn around and play another non-league game against BKW, which, yeah, they're Class C, but they're rough. They're not, and I know Voorheesville beat them by 15 at BKW. Was it 9 days ago, as we're recording this on the 27th. But, BKW is a rough and tumble team, and it's going to be really depend a lot on the fact that is Mia Carmody going to be good to go at some point this week? Because last I heard, I'm not sure she came back for the Mohawk game on Friday. Last I heard, she was still out.
Yeah, they got their second win. They beat Maple Hill again. They got the relatively close win at Maple Hill last week, and that was without Mia. So that was a nice win for them without her. I don't know if she came back from Mohan, but they reeled off 4 straight with her not in the lineup, which that's a success for them. But they need for Shalmont Holy Names, they need to be at full strength to have legitimate, especially against Holy Names. I think the way the matchup works with Shalmont, you want to be at full strength, but they can still be competitive in that game just because of personnel. But Holy Names, yeah, that's one you need to be at full strength for that one if you're Voorheesville to have like a real shot.
All right, so let's do this hypothetical quick. Let's say Voorheesville splits the 2 Shalmont games because they play them twice in a span of just over 2 weeks to end the season. They win out the rest and lose. Let's just throw in another random loss. Let's throw in Holy Names. So let's say they lose 2 of their last 8, it looks like. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 2 of their last 8. But 4 of them are league losses to Academy, Catholic Central, AHN, Shalmont, and then you have the random Ichabod loss. Even if Tamarack wins out, which I don't think they can, because I think they have a game, no offense, but I think they have a game against Stillwater still coming up. Let me double check that real quick. Because I really want to figure out, are we really just looking at Tamarack at 3 automatically, or is there a way? Yeah, so they still have Waterford Half Moon tonight. Then Tamarack goes to Mechanicville. Let me do my math real quick. Next Monday. Then they host Hoosick Falls Thursday the 6th, and they host Stillwater to close the season on the 10th. So let's write off Stillwater as a loss, even though it's at home. So let's say Tamarack finishes 15-4 with a Stillwater loss. Voorheesville finishes, what are we saying, 6-2 the rest of the way? So maybe 15-5. But 4 of those losses are Academy, Catholic Central, Holy Names, and 1 loss to Shalmont. If you're in the room, are you giving Voorheesville the 3? I just feel like, let me see these Tamarack losses. They're home against Mechanicville, at Maple Hill, at Greenwich. I mean, it's close.
Well,
Stillwater's in there.
So here's the thing. So Voorheesville's beat Maple Hill twice, including on the road without their best player. Tamarack lost to Maple Hill by 13.
Fair. Okay.
So if we're gonna, that's where you get those two don't see each other in the regular season. They're non-league, so that's where you start to look at those common opponents.
Right.
Strength of schedule is kind of an obvious, for a Colonial. I think Catskill, as long as Catskill doesn't fumble, really, I do think they've put themselves in pretty good position to land the one.
Right.
After that, big games ahead. That if Mechanicville Tamarack round 2, since Mechanicville won that the first time, Tamarack can put themselves into some sort of position to be a higher seed if they get that win, but they need to get that win. If they don't get that, then Mechanicville is going to be higher than Tamarack.
And the struggle there is that's the only road game Tamarack has left right now on their schedule is Mechanicville.
Mm-hmm.
And the one thing that we've addressed on this show, and even head coach Ron Bedoin has agreed with me on this when I've discussed with him once or twice behind the scenes. Tamarack is, they need that next man up to be with Kayla because, they essentially got away with it the other night with Corinth between the lockdown defense they had on Whitney Cameron and holding her scoreless, and Barbera came out and had 6 quick points in the first quarter, which kind of helped to set the pace with Kayla getting a hot start as well. And that's really what paced them the rest of the way. They need that, kind of like that Liz Darling game we saw at ACC. Not that she has to hit 7 threes, but they need that. It can't just be Kayla and the Bedoinettes. It has to be Kayla and someone else to go out and win on the road. And that's just something that Coach Ron's been preaching. I think Tamarack's been getting gradually better at that over this course of the season, but it's not like it's been a consistent person, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
with Tamarack.
Yeah, I mean, that's what turns you from a team that plays your games and in the 40s like they've done so much this year to a team that can get to 55 plus.
Right.
Generally speaking, that's when we're talking playoff basketball. My thing is you got to get to 55 plus to be able to win games against good teams. So, yeah, that's a big thing. I think the overarching thing, as much as we talk about the hypotheticals with the B seeding, it kind of goes back to what we've been saying for 2 months. It's just kind of throw them in a pot. Catskills put themselves in a good spot. Coxsackie's back end of their schedule is going to be a little interesting just because they do have some more challenges. Mechanicville Tamarack game will be big. I want to say Mechanicville has LaSalle on the schedule again, I think, which could play into it.
Who would you say play LaSalle again? Who would you say plays LaSalle again?
Mechanical has LaSalle on the schedule again, I think, this week.
Yeah, Wednesday.
So that one, so that can play into it, depending on how that goes. And then there's the Colonials, particularly Voorheesville, because the other Colonial Bees, like a Ravenna, they're better among that field than what their record indicates. But at the end of the day, if Ravenna ends up like 5-15 or 4-16 or something like that, they're still going to get a. It's not like you're going to be 5-15 with a 6 seed.
Well, Ravenna's sitting in the A's right now, by the way.
Oh shoot, they're A. My bad. I'm so used to them being B's.
Yeah, it's just Voorheesville and LaSalle are in the B's.
Just Voorheesville and LaSalle, the only Colonial B's since Coble left. Yeah, so my apologies on that.
You're
Uh,
good.
so with those two, and we'll say particularly Voorheesville because of what their body of work has been to this point. Also, they own a win over LaSalle. If yeah, I could see them, depending on how the back end of this year goes, I could see them rolling up to the 2. They
Kind of
could,
thought
it could be 2. They could be as low as maybe 4, but depending on, even though they're not class games, but depending on how the Shalmont Holy Names goes this week, could go a long way in that sense.
I know we've been saying all year B is up for grabs, but I know I'm going to really offend some people by asking this question. If you look between the bodies of work and just trajectory of teams from Thanksgiving to now, I think I have a favorite for the Class B winner. And this is not me blowing smoke up anyone. I think you just talked about who my Class B favorite is.
Voorheesville?
I know they're young, but you even said it yourself when we were talking about them a few weeks ago. He told you, don't come see us in November, come see us in January.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think because they're young, they've bought into his way and his system quicker than I believe a bunch of juniors and seniors would have, because and this is totally out of bounds maybe, but thank you. Love her. But I think that, like, I mean, am I out of bounds in saying this? I mean, just, you could probably put words in my mouth better than I'm able to do it right now.
What, in Voorheesville?
Am I crazy for thinking they're? I mean, again, this is not any offense to
No,
Catskill.
no, you're not. No, you're not, because this is what I'll say about Voorheesville. They have positional balance and ability to produce, which is something that very few teams in B have. The only one off the top of my head that I could say has that is Catskill. And by positional balance, I mean you can get it from your back court, you can get it from your front court. Yeah, it's not just strictly off of guard production. It's not just strictly off of being able to shoot the 3. It's not just strictly off of dumping it into the blocks. They can get offense in different ways. I look at this Class B group, and how many teams have more than one kid that can actually really handle the basketball? How many teams have anybody that can handle the basketball? But yeah, there's very few that can effectively handle the ball on a consistent basis without turning it over on a consistent basis against pressure. And that Voorheesville team, they get up, pressure the ball. They're doing a better job as the year goes on of doing it without hands. So not as much in the way of like your quote ticky tack hand checks and arm bars. They're doing a good job playing without hands in the last few weeks. Mia Carmody being out for a couple weeks could potentially be kind of a blessing in disguise, given what the timing of it was. Because I mean, you never want to you don't want to see anybody get injured, and you don't want to see your best players getting injured for sure. But they're now having to kind of figure it out offensively without her, and they're finding other ways to score. The other guards are knocking shots down, and it also gives her a couple weeks to rest. That was one of the biggest things that I thought a couple of years ago when Averill Park got over that hump with Amelia Wood in her senior year. Amelia Wood, Michelina Lombardi as seniors. They had a rough stretch with injuries and illness in January, where between Amelia, Michelina, and Taylor Holohan, I think they went a few weeks without having all three of them in the lineup. There was two of them were available, one of them was out, and then two of them were out, and then one of them was out, and Oregon was sick, and he couldn't be there. Like, they had a few weeks where it was just kind of all over the place. Other kids had to figure it out. And then those Averill Park teams before that, I always felt like they were just like they'd make it out of Section 2 and they were great in Section 2, but I would look at them in March and like, this looks like kind of a tired group. And they didn't look tired. I'll never forget that year when they got over the hump and they took it all the way in state. They didn't look tired in March. So Mia gets a couple weeks to, she's healing, but at the same time she gets to rest going into the stretch run at the same time. So yeah, I mean that's I don't want to use the word favorite. If I was a betting man, I'm gonna bet on the more seasoned team that's had to bump up against some wolves for stretches of 3 months. The team that I trust can put the ball in the basket when they need to. And I think that a lot of teams that they'll bump into and be are going to have trouble with the type of pressure that they're able to apply on the ball. So that's what if we're I'm not going to say favorites, and if we're going to use any sort of rankings as any barometer or litmus test, I'm just going to be up front and say, as I have this piece of paper, if you see this on YouTube, maybe you'll hear the rustling if you're listening on Spotify. I like to do things with a notebook because I'm old school. This is my little Upstate 20 chicken scratch for the week that you really can't read, but you can see it at least. My Class B, my highest ranked Section 2 state, in the Upstate 20, my highest ranked Section 2, I'll just be real with you, is number 14. So I think B is better, deeper in other spots in the state than it is here. That's just what it is. But who I have right now at number 14 and that highest Section 2 spot is Voorheesville. And I have Catskill right behind them, and I have Coxsackie right behind them, and I have Mechanicsville right behind them. And if we were to literally, if it was to be the Upstate 21 and not the Upstate 20, then Tamarack would be there.
So you have 4 Section 2 teams between 14 and 20 is what you're saying.
14 and 19.
14 and 19, even closer.
Yeah. But yeah, so I think it's, at the end of the day, I do think it's kind of a crapshoot, but I like how Voorheesville matches up. But if Catskill plays how they did on Sunday, if Catskill plays the way they did against Ravenna, they're in deep trouble. If they play the way they did in a playoff atmosphere against Coxsackie at Columbia Green, how it wasn't going to be an Ava Edmond day because she got boxed. others have to step up. If teams leave Alessia off the scouting report, then they could be in good shape too. So,
all right, moving on to Class A, and there's two teams specifically we gotta discuss here. We'll start with the team out of the two that you did not see this past week. Albany Academy, chaotic time, but Jerry Vian stepping up as interim head coach for the remainder of the season with everything that's happened there. They get a nice win, easy win over Lansingburg back on Friday night. Everybody got into the book. Everybody scored. So, always good to make sure everybody gets their PT. But they're getting into a stretch now where, regardless of who's coaching, it's not an easy way to close out your schedule because I know that maybe before the season, people would have looked at this and said, oh, it's just the last four that are hard. No, I'll put last five now because Troy is going to be their senior night this Friday night where they'll honor Kira Ostermar, Emily Thornton, and Eva Gito.
Oh,
but
Academy
Troy,
I thought you meant Troy's senior night. I was like, they're 13 years old.
No, Academy senior night. But they're going to be going against a Troy team that, as of right now at this recording, they've won 7 in a row. It is a younger team, but it's a team that's now playing together for a second year. It's a second year for Will Harris at the helm. He's getting maybe a little more acclimated with, just the way things, just the lay of the land, essentially, with how things roll in Section 2 play. And yeah, it's still 7 in a row. I don't care who you're facing. That does include a close win against Chalmont, a mutual opponent that Academy eventually faces next week, and then at Chalmont. And then Academy goes 2 Holy Names after the Chalmont game. They come home for the rematch against Catholic Central on the 11th. Then they close the year at LaSalle, and I don't give a damn that they beat LaSalle by, 25 or 30 the first 25 the first time around. It's still going to LaSalle in the midst of a chaotic year. Oh, and by the way, we still don't know when Alex Leonard comes back. We don't know if the injury is going to be okay within the next week or if it turns out that maybe she has a mishap and a setback at some point and she misses more time. So there's a lot of balls in the air at this point for this Academy team. And, again, good win last Friday night, but now you have a really big grind to close out your season these last 5 games.
Yeah. That's it's nothing that they're not prepared for. This has been it's been an interesting season with certainly a chaotic last couple weeks, but that's and they've, whether it's a Catholic High or a Chalmont or whoever, this is something that I think they know and they've had to get used to, and it's not something that's new to them. They can have what they perceive as their biggest games of the year, probably like your Catholic High and so that sort of ilk, but they are everybody's biggest game of the year. So you have to prepare for, they don't look at a Troy like it's their Super Bowl or anything like that, but Troy's looking at Academy as like a big game for us, a benchmark sort of game. That's so, I think that's something they've had to get acclimated to. Like they were the young hunters a couple of years ago, and now they're the hunted. So, it's something to, it's a change. It's a natural change, but it's a change. But yeah, I mean, but it's probably not bad for them to have. It's not, and for what Academy is, this is not Murderer's Row for them. It's not like you're playing Catholic High, Shaker, Colony, uh, Aquinas, and who Cardinal O'Hara or something back to back to back. So it's not like a Murderer's Row sort of thing, but it's probably good for them for the last 25% of their season to be tough or enough to keep competitive juices flowing going into Class A playoffs in a few weeks. That frankly, it's going to take a couple weeks for it to heat up a little bit for them.
And then getting to the other team to address here in Class A quick, Broad Open Perth. You mentioned last week how you hadn't gotten to see them yet, and now you purposely waiting for a specific matchup, and you got it. They visited Queensbury, and Queensbury, they were able to earn that season split. They got the home win over Broad Open Perth. And then BP eventually did turn around and win at Glens Falls on Saturday to wrap up that 3 straight Glens Falls road tilt where they won at SGF, then they lost to Queensbury Thursday, and then they win at Glens Falls. So that's all done and over with, and they're probably happy about that, and they'll probably save on the school bus gas mileage now. But now it's a case of they'll host Amsterdam tonight. But let's talk about that Queensbury game back on Thursday. You were in attendance. How was Shea Canavan was doing Shea Canavan things, but in the end, how was Queensbury able to get this W?
I will keep his name out of it, just I don't want him to have to put a signature to it. But at a local media member that I would certainly consider to be a respected local media member that messaged me after the game, and I'm gonna slightly paraphrase and say, the gist of it was Broad Alban, or many teams over the last few years have had Broad Alban problems, and that whole time Broad Alban has had a Shea Canavan problem. And I think we touched on it last week. There's a lot of truth in that statement. Shea is not just a very good player that's playing some of her best basketball now, but she's like the worst kind of matchup for Broad Alban. Broad Alban's their length, their athleticism, their activity on the defensive end, it swallows up lower level guards. But if you're able to have, if you have a guard that is skilled and strong and athletic enough to be able to get to the middle of the floor, and if you get to the middle of the floor against Broad Alban, you collapse the defense, and then you're able to pick them apart. Easier said than done. 90% of the teams that they play don't have a guard that can get to the middle of the floor against them. Shea can get to the middle of the floor. So what surprised me a little bit was I thought, and whether this was playing on the road, whether it was that stretch, whether it was how Shea started the game, I don't know. I thought Broad Alban kind of played on their heels for about a half. So, the first 16 minutes of that game, especially in the second quarter, I expected certain things. I expected them to force the issue a little bit and, at least, just trying to create turnovers. And I thought they played on their heels. Second half, they didn't. He pulled, Coach Russum pulled out, I call it the twin 2-3, where it's a unique, everybody plays 2-3, but pretty much. But how they've done it over the last couple of years. They've had a unique way where they have both Macy and Summer Perry, 6-footers whose wingspans are probably in the 6'4" to 6'6" sort of range. Have those two up at the top of a 2-3 and extend the bejesus out of it. Run them up to half court. Let them be weeping willow trees. Right, just arms, legs all over the place. Trap, aggressively trap if the ball gets into even just not even deep corner, but if the ball gets to the wing, kind of a deep wing spot, aggressively trap it where the wings play high. Once he broke that out in the second half, they had more success creating turnovers. It was a little bit more the way that they would want the game to be played. And they were able to make a little bit of a run. They were able to make a run, and they were able to make a little bit of a run at the game itself. But Broad Albin also isn't a team that's designed for big comebacks. It's not a guard-driven group. They're creating offense off of turnovers, and if it's not off of turnovers, it's a lot of paint points in the half court. It's through Molly Russum in the front court, who can step out and shoot the three, but it's through her in the front court. It's Macy and Summer Perry going to the rim. It's a lot of paint points. So this isn't a team that's really making the scoreboard moving threes like that. A little bit, couple threes here and there, but some teams there's certain teams you get them down 15 and you're like, they're not out of it because they can score, if they get a few stops, whatever, they can, any given time they can fill it up. Broad Albin's roster makeup isn't quite that. So bad second quarter. Shea really kind of grabbed the bull by the horns late in the half. And they competed. I was happy with that because it's the first time that Broad Albin has seen like true adversity this year. I know they went into the New Hartford game with a halftime deficit, but it was single digits. This is the first time they're down. I think it was 31-11 or so. It was a 20-point game at half. It's the first time that they had seen real true adversity where you're going into the locker room. You're down 7 at half to New Hartford. You're going to the locker room thinking we could still win this game. You're down 20 at Queensbury at half. You're probably not going into the locker room thinking that we can still win this. No matter how competitive you are, no matter how optimistic you are. So that second half is, how do you handle that? You haven't lost yet. You're probably going to lose. How do you compete coming out of the locker room? And I thought they showed well in that sense. I thought they competed hard. Did what they could in the second half, but too deep of a hole. Queensbury was able to kind of exploit their weaknesses, their ability, their guard play and their ability to handle the basketball. And Shea was Shea. She saved some of the best basketball of her high school days to, these last few weeks.
I will come back to Coach Bethel and Queensbury in a moment, but we're focused on Class A right now. So just a couple questions about Class A quick. First off, Broad Albin, you mentioned the general offensive strategy of Broad Albin, and really size, at least to my knowledge, is not going to be an issue for the remaining 5 Section 2 games, where 4 of them are at home to begin with. They'll have Amsterdam tonight, a team that they use their size to exploit Amsterdam because they're a very short guard heavy team. Then they go to Hudson Falls next Monday, and then they close out the season at home against Gloversville, Schuylerville, and Scotia before, and this is the game I want to address because you'll have a little more knowledge about them than I do. They do have a non-league game that they have added for February 19th, the Wednesday before sectional seedings. They'll be going out to Section 3 and visiting Central Valley Academy, who just by glancing real quick, they have a schedule that's been kind of all over the place. They played AAA teams, they played AA teams, A's, like really all over the place. They did play Albany Academy. I believe it was right around the Christmas break. What do you make of this Central Valley Academy team, and how do you think that matchup could play out with BP when they meet up in a few weeks?
Partially depends on if CVA is at full strength. I know this was recent Friday. Their top player, Izzy Terziowski, went down with a head injury. Not sure if she's concussed. Not sure about all of that. I think they're optimistic about it, but it was kind of a nasty. I saw the video. It was kind of a nasty crack on the, someone's shoulder to the floor. So we'll see how she is. I know it's still another 3.5 weeks out. If they're at full strength, the good for CVA and the good for just Braun Albany getting a competitive game out of it is they don't bump into they don't bump into teams that have legitimate matchups and for their front court and other forwards that can kind of give them trouble. And Izzy Terziowski, somebody that they have familiarity with. They played AAU together at least for a stretch, with Cap City Scrappers before the BP3 finished off with Foothills Flash. But there's a little bit of familiarity there. But Izzy's a tough player. She's a double machine out in the Utica area. Probably 5'11" range, high-level natural athlete, great motor, great energy, and budding skill set with, some face-up game. She's not just somebody that you dump the ball in the blocks to. She can stretch the floor, attack the rim. And they're well coached. And the CVA coach is not paying me to say that, even though he was also my high school coach, and Coach Schaff. Section 2 ties. He's a St. Johnsville alum. But he's not paying me to say that. They're legitimately a well-coached, typically well game-planned unit. So they're going to get – so Broad Albany will get that for sure. Where Broad Albany could have some success is turning them over. CVA, they've got – Izzy will handle the ball some, and their other top player will handle the ball a good amount, Avery Rich, who's also a senior. But overall, across the board, they can struggle with teams that pressure the ball. They can struggle with turnovers. So it's an interesting matchup. It's a team that kind of matches them in age and athleticism. They don't quite match them in size, but they're closer to matching them than pretty much anybody else they play throughout the year. But there are certain things that they're able to take advantage of.
All right. Now, the one last thing I want to mention about Class A and focus, it still keeps focus on BP. You look at Class A, just in general, there really isn't anyone that I feel like can deal with Broad Albany's size, except potentially one team. And you should know where I'm going with this. Chalmont, really guard heavy. Albany Academy, bunch of guards. Nobody really over 5'8", maybe 5'9" tops on that team. Glens Falls, Ichabod, Scotia, none of them. But Maggie Vollmer, for Holy Names, could be an answer. So, the question I pose to you, in a hypothetical matchup, in a sectional final, would Maggie Vollmer potentially pose enough of a problem to even things out in a Holy Names Broad Albany matchup?
Oh, she can definitely pose enough of a problem to she'd be a main factor in that game, just like she's a main factor in all Holy Names games, really. I think that the bigger story, as much as we could, as much as we look at their size, their height, whatever, both teams, if Broad Albin and Holy Names are to bump into each other down the line, which I assume that there's a strong chance that that happens. I assume that we're talking maybe a 2-3 semifinal with those two. Who is able to exploit the other's guards? I think Holy Name's guards are I think their backcourt is better. I think their backcourt is more reliable. But Broad Albin has a high rate of success of turning opposing guards over.
Hmm.
So is Broad Albin if Broad Albin doesn't generate turnovers, they're not going to have a whole lot of success scoring. And that's just kind of what it is. That's what turns them from being a team that scores in the 40s ish, 40 to 60 something. It's points off turnovers. So if Broad Albin can't turn you over, or if Broad Albin can't turn you over, they're going to struggle to score enough against good teams. So can Holy Name's guards weather the storm of Broad Albin's uniqueness defensively for 32 minutes? And Broad Albin is susceptible to turning it over against pressure themselves. Can Holy Names break them, or can Broad Albin weather that storm? So I look at that. I look at ball security, keeping turnovers down, guards being able to Holy Names guards being able to weather the storm of Broad Albin, and then Broad Albin just kind of as a unit, as a team, being able to keep turnovers down against Holy Names by committee. If when that matchup happens, I'm looking at that a little bit more than I'm looking at, Molly Russum and the Perrys and Maggie Vollmer, from like a sheer size and front court standpoint. But yeah, I mean, that's the only team that has maybe a true five, like a true forward that is big enough and strong enough with, like high level enough physical tools and measurables to not get swallowed up by Broad Albin's front court. Yes.
All right, swinging to Double A. We started it by mentioning Queensbury and what they did against BP, and really between that and keeping the momentum by beating up on Hudson Falls on Saturday, Queensbury, in my mind, really solidifying that case to lock up that 3 seed. I know that Colonial Council scheduling versus suburban scheduling. There's always going to be that debate, but I just feel like they've separated themselves a little bit at this point from like the APs, the Boston Spas, and Niskayunas. Niskayunas kind of been getting it together the more they've been playing together the last month or so. I still feel like Queensbury just has enough of an edge at this point where it basically you're looking at Columbia Catholic Central 1-2, and then I think we're at a point where we can. Again, there's still a few weeks left in the season. Anything can happen, but I feel like right now, at this current juncture, you could pretty comfortably slot Queensbury into that 3 at this point.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see how it goes. With where they put, because Double A is suburban heavy, with the exception of a Catholic high team that you just can't deny in the Colonial, and then Queensbury is is really that one in the foothills that you have to consider among the higher level suburbans and kind of where you place them. Bethlehem's going to have something to say about that, just keeping in mind of what they now. I get that it's without Kaylee Ahern, but now they are the proud owners of a road win at AP. So, and they've beat Niski, so they're in a better spot for a more elevated seed. And I am now pulling up their schedule.
Which schedule are you looking at?
Schedule Galaxy. I want to see what they have left. So Bethlehem. So they got a run coming up, like tomorrow's game, Niski, probably pretty big one. And then 2 more tests over the following week. Home against Bishop Kearney and at Shen, where record looks like kind of a struggle. If they take the Niski game, Kearney and Shen, if this was FanDuel or DraftKings and we were betting, they would be underdogs. But let's say they're able to slide one of those, then that makes things interesting. But yeah, non-suburbans are typically not seated favorably in suburban heavy fields. So I don't know where, I don't feel confident in saying Queensberry is going to end up being a 3. Just because history tends to not treat non-suburbans all that well. In these suburban heavy leagues, but what Queensberry's done is they've beat who's on their schedule. They've beat who's on their schedule, and then they've also, over the course of the season, which is huge. I'm not pointing at anyone. This is not meant at anyone in particular, but there's certain things that I see or that I look for or that I notice at various points of the season. We are now in the 3rd month of the season. Practice started like November 18th. So this is true. This is the 3rd month of the year. Some teams get better. Some teams don't. Some teams I see in-season development. Some teams I don't. Some teams I see the distinguishing of roles and players growing within their roles. Some teams I still see like hooping at the park. And that tends to be a late season separator. And what I see out of Queensberry and with Coach Bethel's group, and this is kind of like a year in, year out thing with that program, but I think more striking this year than in years past, I've seen real in-season development. I watched them early December, and I just watched them last week. What I saw last week is a very different version of a team that had the same players 8 weeks prior. So I think, so I give them credit in that sense. I would be willing to put them in, I would be willing to put them in a seed that lets them wear a white jersey in quarterfinals. Time will tell when we get to that point. They still have to take care of business on their schedule. We're at that 70-75% point. but I've it's not a shock because that's Queensberry, and Coach Bethel she does a very good job year in, year out. But that's a striking improvement from what I saw early in the season to what I just watched.
You mentioned Bethlehem getting the win at Averill Park on Friday. I haven't been able to. I honestly, I forgot that part of the box score. I remember looking at it Friday night and noticing the zeros next to Kaylee. I don't know. It was just a weird weekend, and I guess I just forgot in the midst of everything. Have you spoke to anyone in the Averill Park areas to what's going on there? If it was injury, illness?
She's got a foot issue. She was out. Pretty much out Wednesday when they lost in overtime to Colony as well. She came in, played for a minute or two, maybe. She got a few trips up and down. I'm not sure the specifics of it. I think it's an issue that's not like a sprain or a break or a fracture or a ligament, whatever, not necessarily like a surface wound sort of thing, but it's more in that sort of element. I was under the impression that she's out right now. It's very painful, but it's not probably not a long-term sort of thing.
So maybe kind of like a bone bruise kind of thing, more or less.
Maybe something to do with new pair of shoes and her foot hooked to it in a way that there was a reaction of something like that sort of thing was maybe something deep bruisey in that sense. That would be a little bit of speculation, but I know she was out. She got a few trips up and down the court Wednesday against Colony, but was unable to go, and same thing on Friday. So, and that's an important, it's a big loss for them, an important player, because that's your floor spacer. They don't really shoot the three so much outside of her. So without her, they don't get one-dimensional in how they get their paint points, but they get a little bit one-dimensional in the sense of it's an assault on the paint.
Gotcha.
So yeah, they'll need her. They'll need to be back at full strength, but no Kaylee for Friday, and for all intents and purposes, no Kaylee when they played Colony either.
Okay. It's funny. I mentioned if you had reached out, if you had heard anything, literally as you finished that sentence, I got some input from Coach Organ. I'm not going to describe what's going on, but apparently it's now serious enough to where she's hospitalized.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah, I'm going to I'll let, I'll let Coach address that however he wants, but,
things change over the last few days. Best wishes to Kaylee.
Yeah, so definitely best wishes to Kaylee, and hopefully it's something that can be taken care of quite quickly. But just because you brought up the game, the other game you went to in Section 2, so we'll just bleed AAA right into the AA conversation quick. That Colony game, it took overtime, but they still were able to get it done against Averill Park. Was that, and this may sound kind of harsh, but was that more of a how should I put this? Is that more a judgment? Is that supposed to be more of a judgment of Colony or a judgment of Averill Park? That result.
I don't know what I took away from it. It's been 5 days. I don't know what really to take away from it, which means there's probably nothing to take away from it. It was Averill Park showed some resilience, not having Kaylee and making that game what it was.
Mhm.
That was good. At the same time, that wasn't a surprise, which is a mark next to Averill Park for what kind of program they've been able to build, that they lose somebody important on a team that hasn't been like a dynamic scoring team. And it still wasn't a surprise to me that they were able to make it what it was. Especially so that game. Okay, if there was a takeaway, at least within the game itself, Colony got in some early foul trouble. Lost a starter, 2 fouls early. Came in off the bench. That player got 2 fouls pretty quickly. So they played, and Colony has some depth, but as the season has went on, that bench has shortened a bit. So they went a little bit deeper in the bench than what they have been against quality opponents recently. And they got some bench production. Peyton Rundell gave them some really good first half minutes, the freshman. And they held a 9-point lead at half. So the thought was, for a while, about the first 7 minutes of halftime, the thought was, Colony went a little bit deeper in their bench than maybe they wanted to, and they're still up 9 at the break. The second half might spell trouble for Averill Park. And then the more I thought about it, like, part of it is necessary because Kaylee's out, but AP kind of had the same deal going on, and they went deeper into the bench than I think that there was a point late in the first half that only one starter was on the court for AP. I'm like, well, they're only down now. so they might be able to make something out of this. And good bounce back by them. I thought Lily Wallaber had a strong overall game for them. I think she finished with a double-double, 16 and 11, but I thought she was a consistent presence for them. And they really made it they made it their style. They made it a grind, a rock fight. And it was another kind of off shooting day for Colony. And I think I overheard at one point with a timeout in the fourth quarter. I was on the other side of the court, but it was enough that I thought that I could hear the Colony huddle where Coach Heather Tobias was like, "Get to the rim. We've been shooting threes all day. We're not making three. Get to the rim." And at that point, AP was able to flip that 9-point halftime deficit to a 5-point lead in the waning moments of regulation, and it turned into a really fun back and forth going into OT, where Colony dug in. They were able to force a few turnovers. So Aaliyah Pearson, it's a big 3 on a baseline out of bounds in the final seconds to put them up 2. I think it was like 4 seconds and change left. AP comes out of an advancement. Ari Verardi gets downhill, scores to tie it with enough time left on the clock for Colony to get it again with an advancement. Good action turned into a better rim attempt than what I would have expected, and Liv Hoffman very, very near the ball, hung on the rim for a while. Very nearly ended it in regulation. But Colony was able to survive. Things kind of went off the rails for them when the 9-point halftime lead turned into a 2-possession deficit with 2-3 minutes left. But dug back in on the road, forced OT, held AP to 2 in overtime and won. So that was a game that took a while to warm up, but turned into an entertaining battle where AP was able to force overtime on a really good team without one of their top kids, and Colony was able to get it done on the road in a game where their shot making wasn't there and they were kind of up and down and they had a little bit of foul trouble. So rock fight.
And I'll be there for the rematch on Valentine's night, as Colony will be having their senior night against Averill Park. Seems like an annual tradition, unlike any other. Yes, that is me quoting the commercial for the Masters, but screw it, whatever. I'll claim it as my own. Because 2 years ago, Colony hosted their senior night against Averill Park. Last year, flip flop. This year, flip back. I don't know if this is becoming an annual tradition, but that's how it's been the last 3 years. I don't know why. Just what it is, what it is. All right. Getting into this week's schedule, we've already mentioned the two big games for tonight: Hartford, Northville, Amsterdam, BP. Tuesday, the ones that stand out for me, we have Shaker at Shen, Niski, Bethlehem, Toga at Holy Names. Obviously, the highlight there. No offense to the others, but Shaker Shen.
Yeah, there's a Batman and some Robins in that one. Yes,
right. Honestly, what it really comes down to, I feel like in that game, I'm just gonna bring this up quick because I'm gonna get the rest of the schedule for the week, and I mean, there might be one or two others that stand out for potential games of the week, but this one's right up there with the rest. It really just comes down to Ken Shen's length, because aside from Maya Parker, the four other starters are all relatively tall and lanky and stretch, two ways, guard forwards that can spread the floor. It comes down to how well Shaker can handle that, because and how effective Malia Jackson can get involved against that. Because even though she'll be bigger in size against them, I mean, Gianna Winter loves to hang and bang against players like that on defense. So it's not going to be necessarily an easy task for Malia, despite having the size advantage. And then it'll just be a matter of, can Shaker get up and down the floor in transition? Because I feel like if there's a game where I feel like transition is going to be a key for Shaker, this might be one of those, just to kind of maybe avoid that length. I don't know if that's like a prevailing thought for you at all, but that's just what I got in my mind.
all right, Shen's going to try to do the same thing that Colony tried to do against Shaker, which is pace on everything. Run on makes, run on misses. Doesn't necessarily mean we're jacking up a shot with 23 on the shot clock, but everything is a sprint, and we're going to try to make this a gasser for 32 minutes and see if we can make that happen, and then B, if it has a sort of desired effect. And I thought, as we talked about this a couple weeks ago when Colony and Shaker played each other, I thought Colony was generally able to get that right.
They just didn't have the shots fall.
They just missed a lot at the rim, seeing ghosts, all that stuff. So we'll see that with Shen. That's how Shen wants to play anyways. They execute in the half court. They have some patience in the half court, but they're trying to run. They're even shot goes in, they're inbounding and sprinting off of makes. So they try to get into everything quickly. So that will we'll see kind of a similar, different personnel, but a similar sort of attack against Shaker. And the difference, we might see Shaker play, Colony was matching up against Shaker, we might see Shen play more zone against them. So Shaker being able to attack a zone, if that's attack the length of a Shen zone, if that's what we see.
Mhm.
But
I'm gonna put two names out there real quick. I'm going to star, highlight, bold, underline, italicize, whatever you want to do. Two names on the Shaker roster that I think are going to be very important for them, and it's none of their starters. I think whatever minutes Coach Shipley can get out of Mihaela Roots and Ale Powell that night are going to be ginormous tomorrow night. Because Ale is a stopper who's got boundless energy, and Mihaela can provide a little more size to balance out what Malia brings as the starting five usually. So I feel like whatever Coach Shipley can get out of those two in their bench minutes could provide to be huge tomorrow night against Shen.
Just keep the ship steady, right? Just because it's what I expect the pace of that game to be. It's tough. It's tough to win that with 5.
Yep.
So just to like not in the sense of bench points or big defensive plays or whatever. Just keep the ship steady.
Right. Provide consistency. Going back to that word you love, consistency.
Haven't even said it yet today.
I know. I said it for you.
Yeah.
All right. Wednesday, the two games that stood out for me, Voorheesville at Chalmont, Mechanicville at LaSalle.
Yep.
I'd say Voorheesville Chalmont is a cross classification of a class classification importance, but as far as within its own class, I'd say Mechanicville LaSalle is a little more of the bold matchup, the match to be put in bold out of those two for that night.
Mm-hmm.
Glens Falls at Amsterdam is really the only thing that stood out for Thursday. And Friday, a combination of both rivalry games and games of potential importance for sectionals. I've got Hudson at Catskill listed here, Coxsackie Maple Hill, Catholic Central Chalmont, Holy Names at Voorheesville. I think that'll be, again, another big cross classification matchup for Voorheesville. And then, to me, personally, this is the game of the week. As much as I love the Shaker Shen matchup, let's see what Albany can do against Columbia. That to me, that's the one that gets the spotlights, along with the bold underline italicize for the week, because you get three guests for this week's show. You get the law firm of We Met Landy and Rainville. They will be joining the show on Wednesday. I'll sit down with them. But they'll take on Albany with Azira Gates, who just got 1,000 career points. And a team that's just name how should I put this? The quality, the notability of names on that Albany High roster may not stand out like in recent years with the Whedons, the McNeils, the Edmondses. And obviously they still have a 0, but like it might not have the name power of recent years for the Falcons. But this is a Lady Falcons team that still has put in the work, taken on a very diversified schedule, and now are getting into a true grind of Section 2 scheduling to end the season a bit, with Columbia being one of those opponents.
Yeah, it's a different. Columbia's had a great run to this point, and there's no signs of it stopping. but they still have a couple pretty steep tests on their regular season schedule. Thankfully, they won't have to see them in playoffs because they still have to play Albany and they still have to play Shaker. But Albany is a different matchup for them than anybody else that they bump into, just because of the style of play. Just because of the you might be able to turn them over just because you just foresee that game being kind of like a frenetic, frenzied sort of style. So you're probably going to be able to turn them over like you want to, but you're not able to out athlete an Albany team. So it's an interesting game. It's at Albany too, correct?
Yes.
I know I'm not going to get into it, but I know that again it's been a full year. But I know when they played each other last year, it got spirited. So there's probably not like a whole lot of love lost. So it's yeah, it's a test for it's a test for both. Obviously, it's a test for Albany too, because what Columbia's been able to do and what they've done to others like Shannon Colony. But think of it more so on Columbia's end. It's a test for them in the sense that it's a team that's unique to any other team that they've played this year, whether it's an in area or out of area opponent. They're not like a Lords or a Harrison or a Baldwinsville either.
And then the remainder of the week, well, the weekend actually. So Saturday there's Bishop Kearney actually comes into town for a pair of Section 2 opponents. They'll visit Bethlehem Saturday and then Averill Park on Sunday. Meanwhile, Albany goes down to St. Mary's of Manhasset to play them less than 24 hours after the Columbia game. And Burn Knox Westerlo goes to Voorheesville on Saturday as well. Let me rewind to the Kearney comment real quick. I mean, what do you make of those two matchups at Bethlehem and at Averill Park over the weekend?
BK is very good, so that's the first thing that I'll make of it. So they're tough tests for both of our locals that they're coming to play. Far from the deepest team you're ever going to see, but senior D1 bound guards. Clarissa Good, who's going to Binghamton. Asia Wilson, who's going to Holy Cross, was one of my just a dog, one of my absolute favorites to watch. And if you're not doing anything over the course of the weekend, Kearney also has, along with the D1 backcourt, they have kind of the next big thing, or at least as everything is tracking, kind of the next big thing in upstate New York in 7th grader Leah Dukes. About, middle school 6'1", probably. I think she might be listing herself as 6'2" at this point. Like, from 6'1", lefty, super long, skilled, can shoot it, puts it on the deck, finishes around backboard level. She's still got to grow into her body, but she's kind of the next big thing. Not a bad idea to go. If you have an opportunity to watch that kid live as a youngster, she's got worlds and worlds of potential. But yeah, they're a tough team to play because they're unique to anybody. That I'm not saying that they're better than everybody that we have around here. I don't believe that they're better than everybody around here, but they're unique to everybody that we have around here in the sense that they have Asia and Clarissa are both true point guards. So they're running a two true point, like high level point guard lineup that with that they do a better job than pretty much everybody of dictating pace, dictating style, kind of controlling how the game is played. So unique in that sense. And it's tough, it's tough to beat a team to play with a team for 32 full minutes that has two guards like that. And that's where Kearney's kind of made their money so far this year. They've played a lot of there's been a lot of teams that have played them close. There's been teams that have had second half leads on them. Now, I watched when Cardinal O'Hara had a second half lead on them at the Josh Palmer Championship in Elmira, and they ended up winning the game by 4. O'Hara had a lead on them, I think a 7-point lead late in the first half. They played against each other again over the weekend, and Kearney ends up winning the game by 11. They play a local game, Our Lady of Mercy, another private school in Rochester. Close game. Mercy maybe had a lead early in the third quarter. Kearney wins that game by 10. They've made a living out of Aquinas. Aquinas had a double-digit lead on them in the second half at Kearney. Kearney ends up winning the game, I think 65-60. So there's been a lot of these examples of they've been able to break through over the course of the later stage of the 32-minute game with the guards that they possess and just kind of the elder statesmen. They've been at the varsity level for a long time. They were both on that team when Kearney won the when BK won the AA state championship some years ago. Young players. Riss was on that team. Asia she didn't really have the opportunity to play because she was just coming off a knee injury at that point. But they've been around for a hot minute. So it's a fun matchup. It'll be I think a difficult one it'll be a tough test for the Bethlehem guards to try to stand up to. Although Bethlehem has a unique matchup that in Caitlin Robbins that Kearney's going to have to deal with. So she's unique to them, and Averill Park, their style is a little bit unique to BK, just in the the grittiness. So they both should be interesting matchups. Could be unique styles of game from Saturday into Sunday. I will probably be there Sunday. If they play AP Sunday, probably out of town on Saturday, but Sunday I'll probably be at AP for that one. But yeah, I always say if you've got a high level team from out of the area coming into your backyard and you're not doing anything, go watch it.
And just so everyone knows, the Kearney game at Bethlehem is a 1 p.m. start Saturday. The game at AP on Sunday is 12:30. So if you're interested, you have the start times, you have the dates. Now you have no good reason. No good reason to say no at that point. Jeff, another week down. Like I mentioned, we're 25 days away from the sectional seeding meeting. And by this time next week, we'll be at 18. We'll just keep ticking the clock down to, I know what it's typically our favorite time of the year. So,
yeah. I think we're in that same boat as pretty much everybody. This is why, and not to ramble anymore, but this is why we get to this time of year. You don't. We've been able to talk about me being at Section 2 games a lot up to this point. And these coming weeks, you're going to hear that probably less and less. Like we just talked about me being a little bit less over this past week. And you're going to see it a little bit, that's going to be the trend over the next 2 or 3 weeks. I think that, what we just talked about for the last couple hours is kind of reflected with everybody that we've made it to that time of year. I think the good teams in Section 2 are
Yep.
looking forward to playoffs, and the not so good teams in Section 2 are looking forward to softball and track and things like that. So you see me kind of get out of Dodge a little bit more around this time of year, because there are other areas. Like, I love going to the Southern Tier. I was in the Southern Tier on Saturday. Caught a couple Horseheads, Elmira, Susquehanna Valley, Waverly. I like going to that area this time of year because they all have league playoffs before sectionals. So how we're talking about these, these Columbia Albanys and these Shen Shakers, and we're thinking about playoff seeding. That Coxsackie-Catskill game felt like it mattered. It had a playoff atmosphere to it already, because that was de facto league championship sort of game. And when I go to some of these other areas, a lot of times we're getting more playoff atmospheres because, SV Waverly and Horseheads Elmira, they had a lot to do with, they've got league playoffs in 3 weeks before the sectionals start. So they had more of that, like, this really matters sort of feel to it. So you see me start to see some of those games a little bit more. Doesn't feel like the dog days, feels like it really matters, or feels like they all realize that it really matters. I hit a couple prep games this time of year. We didn't really talk about that, but before that, Colony Averill Park, what I did before that was, and I'll just bring it up very quickly because it includes some Section 2 names, but I went out to Darrow on the New York-Massachusetts border in New Lebanon.
Darrow against Storm King. I saw that.
Storm King, which had a lot of upstate New Yorkers on that, between those two rosters, including, some Section 2s, Jayla Hughley at Darrow, who was Albany leadership, Gwen Case is at Darrow, who was Gilderland, Sophia Lee at Storm King, who's from Boston Spa. And then there were some other, like Ava Scaturo, who's a Kingston kid, Daniela McLean at Darrow, who was Syracuse Academy of Science. But so there was that. I think I'm going to Hoosac this week. At some point, I believe they play New Hampton on Wednesday. So, yeah, so you see me start to bounce around a little bit more during the weeks for the single games, because it's kind of a different feel. Like, we're going to be talking a lot about the thought of playoff seeding. I think that's kind of what most of Section 2 is starting to feel at this point. Like, all right, it's right around the corner. Getting to that time.
Oh, who's that? Oh, so we got Julie McBride coaching. We got UNH commit Carolina Williams, who was at Ichabod a few years ago. We got Tegan Keene, who just transferred from Burn Hills and is there now. Gabby Telesco, Anna Mosier, Ava Mamone. I mean, that's fun. That's fun. You'll enjoy that. Yeah, that'll be good fun. Yeah, but that does it for episode 42, part 1. Don't forget, subscribe to Spotify and YouTube channels, like the shows, comment on them, whatever you got to do. We're on Facebook. You know the name of the show. Go look it up. We're also at 84 Feet Podcast on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it. And yeah, at NYS Takeover on X/Twitter for Jeff, and at Empire State Takeover on the IG, right?
On everything else, yep. You can type in Empire State Takeover on anything. It's going to lead you to where I'm at.
And then EmpireStateTakeover.com is the site if you want to check out those Upstate 20 rankings. Good, sir. Thank you again, and we'll catch you again next week. All right, man?
Yes, sir.